Hollow Knight is a refreshing experience. New creative ideas rarely turn out as successes in the gaming industry. The best-selling video games are often sequels to previous games. You could point to the obvious examples that most people tend to despise, such as FIFA, Madden, and Call of Duty, but other companies are just as guilty of this, with examples such as Mario, The Legend of Zelda, Pokemon, etc. Successful video games are serialized, and that isn't to say I hate serialized games. I adore Persona 5, and Mother 3 is one of my favorite video games ever made. But there's always something fascinating about a new experience. Something so creative and unique that it beckons you to play it. Undertale was a viral hit back in 2015. And while there are clear inspirations from the Mother series, it truly was its own game. There are fantasy races for bunnies, skeletons, and even fish, setting itself apart from the stereotypical dwarves, elves, and humans, or dark elves if you're feeling really fancy. It boasted some witty dialogue too, along with a creative battle system that's distinct from other turn-based RPGs. Hollow Knight falls in the same vein as Undertale. Its fantasy race design centers around insects, which is a unique and consistent aesthetic about the game. And it contains an engaging implementation of the Metroidvania combat system. Now, I first tried to play Hollow Knight back in 2018, but I was bored, lost, confused, and frustrated. So if you stick around, you'll get to see why I now love this game, how I changed my mind, and why Hollow Knight provides a creative exploration of control in game design. Don't worry if you haven't played the game yet. This video will be as spoiler-free as possible, though some early areas will be shown on screen when appropriate. I experienced Tolkien's Lord of the Rings saga in my early years of adolescence. It was some of my first exposure to the fantasy genre, so all of these elves and dwarves and hobbits seemed rare and creative to me. How did Tolkien create all of these unique races? How can they all be humanoid and still feel so different? Are all fantasy worlds like this one? I was enthralled, to say the least. Curious about all the other unique, creative creatures that the fantasy genre could come up with, I decided to find more and more fantasy media, in search of that creativity I craved. The problem is, those worlds don't exist. Everyone else just uses the same creatures that Tolkien did. Sometimes they have fancy names, but most of the time it's all the same. Elves and dwarves and halflings. It's why I struggle to be engaged by the character creation in Dungeons & Dragons. Choosing between the generic groups of elves and dwarves and so on isn't interesting to me anymore. These creatures are ubiquitous. No one creates unique fantasy races. When there is the rare exception though, I'm always impressed. The Legend of Zelda, for instance, is a high fantasy series that thrives on creative creatures. Ocarina of Time introduced the Gorons, large rock people, the Gerudo, a tribe of tall militant women, and the Zora, who are the fish people. The Zora were technically introduced in earlier games as enemies, but the interpretation for this game is still distinct from other entries. They have a more humanoid figure, boasting a cyan and blue color scheme to differentiate them. The Gorons are inspired by dwarves, but they're far more mellow and friendly than their aggressive dwarven counterparts. These were unique fantasy races, the ones I kept looking for, except I had already seen them long before I ever experienced Tolkien's enthralling world. Okay, cool, but what does this have to do with Hollow Knight? Well, it has the same flavor of creativity for the fantasy races because they're all bugs. Each character you encounter is a different bug, each design is still unique and different both despite and because of that commitment. Some very early game spoilers will follow, but it's for a good reason. I'm going to compare a few characters to demonstrate how unique each one is. One of the earliest characters you find on your journey is Elderbug, located in Dirtmouth. He's an old bug with an arched back, wearing a dark gray cloak and boasting 2 curved horns on top of his head, which is quite bony. He has a rather large shell on his back that conceals part of his aforementioned cloak, and under that are his thin limbs. All of these attributes convey his age as a character. His arched back is a sign of his decrepit form, thereby demonstrating his physical age, along with his thin, frail body underneath the cloak. Another one of these earlier characters is Sly. He resembles a fly, so he naturally has 2 large eyes like one, along with the slight hair and a small figure. His design is a stark contrast from that of Elderbug, but his personality shines instead through his dialogue, not his design. Sly comes off as shady throughout his dialogue, and his name doesn't really help remedy that either. These two character designs are both based on bugs as the core idea, but they have varying designs, heights, and personalities. That's what makes me so enthralled by these bugs. They're all just bugs, but it's so unique as a concept for fantasy races. Each bug is distinct from one another, and even when there are similar types of bugs, the personalities and designs are distinct. Take Cornifer and Iselda, for example. They both resemble a mosquito, yet they are different and distinct in my mind. Cornifer takes up more screen space, and he's always sitting, enthralled by his maps. Iselda is always standing, slouched over the shop counter, disinterested in what she's doing. These unique qualities carry over into the UI design and soundtrack too. The UI features hand-drawn designs that evoke royalty. They're all white, contrasting the dark shadow behind them. It creates a fantastic contrast that helps both visibility and aesthetic appeal. The soundtrack is so beautiful too. The quiet title theme seemed generic at first, but it's grown on me with time. Christopher Larkin's work has some wonderful hidden surprises, so while I desperately want to divulge all of its details, I should probably stop before I spoil anything too exciting. Needless to say, Hollow Knight's presentation is fantastic. I think it's unique and creative enough to warrant this much praise. While the aesthetics helped me appreciate the game, I didn't become addicted until I started exploring the wonderful vistas of Hallownest. Exploring Hollow Knight is like traversing a desert. You are alone, lost, and frankly perplexed as to how the hell you can navigate this strange world. It's not a desert in the sense that there's nothing to do. Far from it. There are a plethora of hidden secrets and areas to unlock as you gain new abilities in your adventure. This metaphorical desert is lonely and dangerous. Your only solace is when you find small traces of life, like the varied, unique characters you meet along the way. Starting this game, you are alone and lost and confused, just like I was when I first played. It took me a while to realize this, but that's kind of the point. The most compelling part of the game is that you, the player, have to piece together what's going on, what happened, and how to survive. Both you and the knight, that's the character you control, by the way, are linked. If you want to be pedantic, this concept is called ludonarrative harmony. But not knowing the word doesn't change what's happening. The literal story of Hollow Knight is about the player character traversing Hallownest and piecing together what's happening. The central mystery arrives in the first cutscene, when you see the statue begin to crack as whatever's inside starts to shriek. It shouldn't take too long to realize that statue bad, stop statue. In terms of gameplay, you enter this unknown land searching for where to go. Both of these capitalize on your lack of knowledge about your predicament. Because of that, they're linked, which is why it's a great instance of ludonarrative harmony. Ludo is just a prefix that refers to gameplay. Narrative refers to, well, narrative. So combining the two just means that ludonarrative harmony is the same as gameplay narrative harmony. Combining or mixing the two doesn't come up too often in games criticism, because most games will simply achieve this by existing. Very rarely do games exhibit ludonarrative dissonance, though many have cried wolf trying to cite the word and sound intelligent in the process. You could say I have the same flaw by bringing up its counterpart, ludonarrative harmony, but I hope the explanation was enough, so that we're all informed on the topic. This isn't meant to confuse you, knowing the word just makes it easier to talk about. With that aside, Hollow Knight excels at ludonarrative harmony, which is why it's far more important to talk about here than for other games. Plus, the Metroidvania tropes really aid this harmony. The trope I want to discuss the most is collecting power-ups. It shouldn't be a secret that you collect power-ups in a Metroidvania. Power-ups are a great source of progression. There's a visible, tangible contrast to your character at the start of the game and at its end. This type of progression is, essentially, a series of locks and keys. Challenges and rewards hide behind wall jump-shaped, dash-shaped, or super dash-shaped locks like the ones you're seeing on screen. Even starting areas like Forgotten Crossroads contain these locks, ones which have ledges that are too far away or walls that block you from accessing a secret. Returning with the necessary power-up is rewarding. It's a great approach to encourage exploration and reward keen-eyed players. This is all well and good, but what attracted me the most to this world was its structure. Like I said before, it's a desert. There isn't anything helpful or comforting in some of these barren landscapes. However, the developers sprinkle little oases throughout. Some of these could be a character interaction, a reminder of the little life left in Hallownest. These were some of my favorite because each character has a developed, optional storyline. I always chatted with these bugs when I had the opportunity, and I wasn't disappointed. It fits with the Metroidvania style of storytelling that focuses on specific moments instead of overarching epic plot points. Specific character beats are meant to be incredibly resonant and leave a striking impact on the player. I don't want to spoil what I mean, but I'd encourage you to talk with these characters you find on your journey if you play this game. They're always great to stumble upon. Another type of oasis is a hidden secret in the world. Hidden paths are a small safe place, something which is untouched by the destruction of whatever happened to this once great kingdom. Finding these secrets is exhilarating, and they provide rewards in the form of currency or charms. They aren't as substantial as the character encounters, but these situations net you a tangible reward, thereby encouraging further and deeper exploration. You'll find some quite serene vistas on your journey, as well as some surprises I'd rather not ruin. Surprise really is the best part of the game. Each oasis you find is yet another surprise, which is what makes Hollow Knight so refreshing to play. As I finish more and more video games, I'm not surprised by them as much as I once was. Yet Hollow Knight still could. It was not what I expected, and I'm thankful for that. You should play this game because it's surprising. Even if you've had one or two of them ruined already, it is still worth your time and money. Playing this game has been a great time these past few weeks. It's creepy, endearing, and unique. Despite all of my praise, there were a few areas that seem problematic, which you should probably know about. If you're looking for some tight platforming throughout, you won't find it with Hollow Knight. The perfected platforming challenges are in the game, and they're insanely difficult. However, they only occur near the end. Most platforming can be completed with basic moveset options because the focus is on exploration. If you're patient enough, Hollow Knight does feature challenging platforming, just not as frequently as I think it needed. The main story is a bit too underwhelming in my opinion. I'm not going to misconstrue what happens and say that the game supposedly has no story, because that's not true. There is a story in Hollow Knight, but there's also a lot of missed potential. The character moments I mentioned earlier are the best part, yet they're so disconnected from the main story that the character interactions are what I remembered more. If you don't care for an involved story in your Metroidvanias, and you don't really want to be playing an involved platformer either, the shortcomings of Hollow Knight probably won't seem that bothersome to you. Again, that's what I thought were its shortcomings. I'm sure you won't entirely agree with what I said. Those problems don't majorly harm the experience though. Sure, there were some missed opportunities and disappointing aspects, but the core experience of exploration and combat are so refreshing. Hollow Knight is a refreshing oasis in a desert of sequels, and I can't wait to see what Team Cherry does next. So, I kinda lied in my last video, because this was not one of the planned videos I was going to release. I wanted to finish and upload the Xenoblade video last month, but I became hopelessly addicted to Hollow Knight. I just had to make a video on it after that. This video was also supposed to come out last month as kind of a spooky October video, but well, you can see how that turned out. I do want to talk about this game at a later time in a more in-depth format, but this is basically my glowing recommendation to play Hollow Knight even if you were turned off of the game at first. I'm still sticking to the one video per month rule I set for myself, and the next video, ideally, will be about Xenoblade. It'll be out as soon as it's ready. Thank you all for your patience with this. I also wanted this video to be shorter so that I could focus more on Xenoblade, but it still ended up longer than I wanted it to be somehow. Let me know if you would actually be interested in a long-form Hollow Knight video. I'd really love to do one, and if there is interest, I'll gladly make one. And for those who don't know, by long form, I mean kind of commentary throughout the whole game, analyzing everything I can. So, I don't know how long, probably several hours, knowing me. And after Xenoblade, there are plans for Shadow of the Colossus, and maybe Super Mario Sunshine eventually, but I don't know. We'll see. Like always, make sure to leave a dislike and a hate comment down below saying I was too cynical. And subscribing just to unsubscribe, you know. Anyway, I may be cynical, but I wish you the very best.